We're getting close to closing the book on the 2024 Mariners for good, and today we are going to begin our positional grades with a look at catcher, infield, and outfield coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. This is Tony Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is time to grade the 2024 Mariners. We'll be looking at the catchers, the infielders, and the outfielders on today's show. But before we do that, shout out to our title sponsor today, Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. And you know what else you should do today? Check out our Patreon. We are talking about our off-season plan, folks. If you want to hear kind of our early ideas with that, sign up for our Patreon. And you can sign up for a free 7-day trial. You don't even need to pay money to hear a couple of our latest shows. So do it. Get on it. You should, though. You should. I do recommend that. So let's start grading some of these 2024 Mariners. We are going to be individually grading guys, but we're not going to individually grade everyone, right? We're not going to grade the Samad Taylors of the world and the Luis Ariases of the world and the Leo Rivases of the world. It's strictly going to be the main cast of characters who made up the 2024 Mariners. And when talking about the catchers, there really was only one main character in that group, and that was Cal Raleigh, of course. I mean, Mitch Garver kind of joined that group a little later on. He was initially supposed to be the DH, ended up being the backup catcher. We'll get into the reasons why and how that factors into his grade here in just a second. But let's start with Cal, who we anointed, Colby, as our team MVP on yesterday's episode. So what does that get him in terms of a grade?
Oh, boy. Tough one. A sounds about right.
Sounds all right. Sounds all right. Sounds pretty much on the mark. Yeah. What else could you ask for from Cal Raleigh this year? 34 bombs, 100 ribs. I know the batting average and the on base was low and the WRC plus was only like 117, but I don't really care how you get to 34 bombs and 100 ribs as long as you get there. That's a pretty remarkable season, offensively speaking, for a catcher, right? And then everything that we talked about yesterday with the leadership, the defense, right? Catching 135 games, which he shouldn't be asked to do again, but that's a whole nother conversation. Working with one of the best, if not the best, rotations in baseball, calling great games on a night-to-night basis. The defensive metrics love Cal Raleigh. Working with just a diverse group of arms in general between that rotation and the bullpen. You know, playing through pain, right? Hitting a home run in Texas when he has a broken tooth in his mouth, all that stuff, right? So, yeah, A+ for Cal Raleigh, because again, like, what else can you ask for here? You are nitpicking if you are asking for more from Cal Raleigh after the season that he just had. So yeah, is there room to grow in a couple of departments? Sure, but overall, this was an excellent season, especially for a catcher.
Best defensive catcher in the American League, best offensive catcher in the American League. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Would it be great if he could hit 250? Sure. Awesome.
Sure.
Does he need to? No. Nope.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Mitch Garver is like kind of on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, right?
It's got to be an F. Like, there's just no way. You know, like Garver, seems like a good guy. Obviously, the struggles really got to him this year.
Yeah.
There was that whole nasty, filthy, off the field thing with the fans attacking him and his family and all that stuff. So yeah, it was a rough year for Mitch. I sympathize with him, and I hope that he can turn it around and he comes out next year and he silences the haters. But at the end of the day, the resume he put forth this year is an F. It's terrible. It was god awful. You signed this guy to be the everyday DH. He ends up kind of being forced back into the role of a backup catcher who hardly ever played. And his batting average, his on base, his slug, they all dropped 80 plus points, and he just wasn't good. Like it just, at the end of the day, he wasn't good. So I hope he bounces back, and I think he can to some degree. But judging based on 2024 alone, it's an F.
Yeah, I mean they say availability is the best ability, right? And that was the biggest concern with Garver going into this season was, is he going to be able to stay healthy enough for you to extract enough value out of him and out of that contract? Well, he stayed healthy. He was able to be on the field consistently. The problem was he wasn't giving you a reason to play him because he was just so bad. 172, 286, 341. It's an 88 WRC plus, negative 0.4 F4. 30.9% K rate. That went up by pretty much 7% from his previous year. The walk rate stayed high. He still hit 15 bombs, but yeah, he wasn't bringing really much of anything to the table this year. And at the end of it, he became a way too expensive backup catcher. Like he was producing at a rate that cost you about $10 million less than this. So yeah, I'm hoping for the best for him. I assume that he's still going to be around in 2025 because at least he has a role. When we talk about like Mitch Haniger doesn't really have a role and he's making all that money. At least Garver, it's like, okay, well, we're paying him way too much for the role that he's going to fill, but at the very least, he doesn't really give us much of a roster headache, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So
he's not blocking anybody who should be playing over him. He's not, so bad offensively and so bad defensively that you're just trying to force the backup catcher role on him. Like, no, he can handle that. And again, he's not blocking anybody. And we were saying Harry Ford down in the comments. You didn't watch Harry Ford play this year. Stop. He's not blocking Harry Ford, not for at least the first half of 2025. Again, I hope he turns it around. Seems like a good dude, but it's an F.
Yeah.
Like I don't see really any other grade that you can give.
Yeah, at best it's a D minus, but it's more realistically an F because it was just an awful year. All right, so let's get into the infield here a little bit. Justin Turner. Because Ty France obviously didn't finish the season with the team, so no need to grade him. Turner did finish the season with the team as primarily their first baseman. I mean, Luke Raley also spent some time over there, but we'll get to Raley a little later on in this episode. So Turner came over for 2 months, was pretty much the guy that you were hoping he would be. He was pretty much the guy that he was in Toronto. Hit for a high average, got on base, didn't bring a ton of power. But also brought some leadership. So I would say B plus here for everything that he brought in the clubhouse. And then he also produced on the field.
Yeah. I would say Turner gets, a B. Like it's probably more than that just based on the off the field stuff. But I don't know how to factor that in. I don't know how to quantify that.
Sure.
In our conversation. So, I mean, it's probably more, but when he came to Seattle, he was basically the same guy he was in Toronto, and that's exactly what the Mariners wanted. That's what they needed. And there were times where he was better than that. I think that Turner was basically Justin Turner was good enough that he went from this is a rental and then you never see him again to like, well, I don't know. Maybe it makes sense to bring back Justin Turner for a year if he's open to it. I would say it's a solid B. It's not an A. It might look like an A when you compare him to like what we watched from March until about July about the All-Star break offensively, but I think it's a solid B. He can still hit a little bit, it's Didn't give you much defensively, didn't give you much on the bases, wasn't going to. Didn't hit for a ton of power. Again, not really what you brought him in to do. So I think, based on what you needed him to do and what he ended up giving you, solid B plus, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and I mean, to be able to produce at that age too, offensively at an above average clip. I mean, it's not every day that you see, a 39-year-old, 40-year-old like producing the way that Justin Turner did this year. So, yeah, props to Justin Turner, and we'll see if he might have a future in Seattle as well. All right, so we are going to get into kind of a mixed bag here with Jorge Polanco, Josh Rojas, and JP Crawford in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel and Gametime. NFL fans can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Yeah, you heard that right. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. So I used to live in New Mexico, and down in New Mexico, there are 0 pro sports teams, and a lot of bands and artists that I listen to skip going there more often than not. So when I moved to Toronto, where there's a baseball team, a basketball team, a hockey team, even a soccer team, and there's great music being played every night in the city, I was right in my element. When I want to catch a ball game, or my wife and I want to see a band, I always get my tickets through Gametime. And that was the case well before Gametime sponsored our network and before I even joined the network, because it is truly the best ticketing service out there, hands down. I truly believe that. And now it's getting even better thanks to Gametime Picks. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can just go on the app, it'll show me the best deal right away, it'll show me the exact view I'll have, and most importantly, it'll tell me exactly what I'm going to pay with Gametime's all-in pricing, so there are no annoying little fees that pop up at the last second. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, that's LOCKEDONMLB, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. We are grading the 2024 Mariners position players today. We just graded Cal Raleigh, Mitch Garver, and Justin Turner. And we're going to keep things in the infield with Jorge Polanco, who was the most notable addition in the offseason for the Mariners. But like Mitch Garver, maybe not to the extremes of Mitch Garver, Polanco disappointed quite a bit this year. I'm not going to give him an F because, again, it wasn't to the extreme level of disappointment that Garver was, though at times they were equally struggling. But I'm probably a C- at best for Polo, and probably somewhere in the D range.
Yeah, I think I would give. Yeah, I think C-, because he was pretty good in July and August, but he was dreadful in April and May, and then just he was okay in September, but obviously defense also factors in here. He was terrible defender, to the point where he would make a slightly above, average difficulty play, and you'd be like, oh, wow, like that's noteworthy. But yeah, Polanco, so bad this year that the $12 million option that, I don't know, 6 months ago we thought was for sure getting picked up is now almost certainly not getting picked up. Like that just speaks to how far and how fast he fell. And also he had, some trouble staying on the field at times this year too. So but he wasn't completely useless for the entire season either. So
yeah,
I think Polo, it's a D+, C-, somewhere in that range. I'll give him a C- just because, there was significant stretches of the season where he was an actual like plus player for you. But just overall, the consistency is not there to be any higher than a C minus.
No, it was by far the worst season of his career. 213, 296, 355. That's 92 WRC plus. Just worth 0.3. F4 obviously was terrible defensively. The K rate jumped up by about 4% from the year prior. The walk rate actually went down by about 1% from the year prior. Did hit 16 home runs, drove in 45 runs and 118 games played, but overall, yeah, I view Polanco's season as a negative, especially because he was nowhere close to the player that you're hoping to get. You know, you were hoping to get the guy that was like a 115 to 120 WRC plus guy that he had been in, you know, the last 3 years and for the last 5 years. And you didn't get that. You didn't get anywhere close to that. And second base continues to be a problem for the Mariners that they just haven't been able to solve really since trading Robinson Cano. I mean, they had that one good COVID year from Dylan Moore, but that was obviously the COVID year. That's a shortened season. So in an actual full real MLB season, they haven't had a good year from a second baseman since Cano, and we'll see if they're able to finally figure that out this year. But that carousel continues to go. All right, so Josh Rojas, weird year for Josh Rojas because he was really good defensively, one of the better defensive third basemen in the league, and he got off to a hot start. He was one of the few guys that actually put together consistently good looking at bats in the early portion of the season for the Mariners. It was actually very rare to see competent offense from the Mariners at that time when Rojas was cooking. But then he fell off a cliff, was still able to hit righties pretty well, but overall just fell off a cliff offensively. And the defense wasn't as good as the year went along. It was fairly inconsistent, but he still overall had a really good year defensively. I'll give him a C. I think that's a good place for Josh Rojas.
Yeah, I think that's about right. C, maybe a C plus. Like he was legit. Like the totality of his defense was well above average, and there were first 6 weeks he was great, and then he was pretty bad, and then there was like a 2.5, 3 week stretch where he was pretty good again. But the bat just, again, wildly inconsistent. The defense consistent enough, stole enough bags, like gave you enough defensively and enough on the bases to be, a decent player. But don't let the Mariners finishing 5th overall and third base F4 fool you. This is a major hole in the Mariners, infield and in their lineup. And Rojas is the main contributor of that because he was the main third baseman. So I think a C plus somewhere in that range is appropriate here. So I just, pretty disappointed. I thought Rojas was in for a better year this year because he looked so good when he came over from Seattle, and it looked like the Mariners had found something in his swing and tweaked it, and he was going to hit, 15 or 20 homers and all that. And just, Nope. They got the defense. They got, 11 steals or something like that. And they got about 6 to 8 weeks total where he was he ranged from an above average major league hitter to a great hitter. And then the other, unfortunately, the other 20 weeks of the year, he was objectively terrible at the plate. So I think when you consider the whole package, C plus, somewhere in that range.
Initially it was supposed to be a platoon of Rojas and Luis Arias at third base. Ended up becoming kind of a platoon between Rojas and Dylan Moore. So let's talk about Dylan Moore's year. What was he, like 4th on the team in F4 this year?
Yeah.
Which is a problem. I mean, props to
says
Dylan
more
Moore.
about the Mariners than it does Moore.
Yeah. Props to Dylan Moore, but also that's kind of a problem if Dylan Moore is like your 4th most valuable position player on your team. Because Demo this year, he was Demo, right? He was the guy that we've seen for the last how many years that he's been with this team. 201, 320, 367, 2.4 F4, 10 homers,
30 bags.
He stole 32 bags, which is a career high. He's a utility player who will give you, average to slightly above average defense depending on the spot that he plays. And he's gonna, hit for some pop and
Draw
make
walks,
things and
strike
make
out.
things. Yeah, he's gonna draw walks. He's gonna make things happen on the base pass when he gets on there. I'll give Demo a B.
Yeah, I think this is like a C plus, B minus. Like it meets expectations.
Sure.
This is who Dylan Moore is, and people always act surprised when Dylan Moore does Dylan Moore things. He's going to hit for a low average. He's going to strike out, but he's also going to steal bags. He's going to draw walks. He's going to hit a surprising amount of home runs. He's going to hit the ball hard, or he's going to swing and miss. Like that's his game. That's who Demo is. So I think overall, you look at those guys, and it's like, or you look at that guy, and it's like, look, he was who we thought he was, who we knew he was. There's nothing surprising here. So yeah, let's like B minus. Give Demo a B minus.
Sure. And then lastly, as we wrap up things in the infield, JP Crawford. This is
D.
Yeah. I think it has to be a D because you go from him having his breakout season. And look, we had talked about this. Like he's probably not going to be a 130 WRC plus guy this year, but can he at least be 110 to 115 with the changes that he made? Going to Driveline before the 2023 season, it seemed like he had kind of reinvented himself as a hitter. So it's like, okay, maybe he's no longer the below 100 WRC plus or the guy that kind of hovers around 100 WRC plus that he was before 2023. But can he be, somewhere in the, 110, 115 range? I felt like that was reasonable. Instead, we got a massively regressive 89 WRC plus season, right? And look, at the very least, he had a better year defensively by the metrics. He had his best. He had his best year by outs above average in the last 3 or 4 years, I believe,
since he won the Gold Glove in 2020.
Yeah. So, so he made strides there, but then he gets hurt a couple times, which is obviously out of his control. But when he was on the field, I mean, before the injury, after the injury, it doesn't matter. He was not good offensively. 202, 304, 321. That's an 89 WRC plus. That's just not cutting it.
No, and again, the defense, well, it was better this year and it was above average. It wasn't, like prime Ozzie Smith where you're fine if a guy can't hit because he's so good defensively at a premium position that you just live with it. It's not JP. Like that's not who JP is. He has to give you something offensively. Unfortunately, this year looked a lot like, just even watching him at the plate, this looked a lot more like 2022, 2021 JP with the swing and all that stuff. Now, how much did the injuries come into that? How much did like a wrist injury, right? One of them was a wrist injury. So obviously that's not great. But yeah, I don't think anybody expected JP to hit 20 home runs again, but just based on the year he came off of, the expectations, and then what he actually did this year, like it was arguably the most disappointing season of any Mariner.
D for disappointment, I would say, because I was very let down by the year that JP had this year.
Yeah. Well, we know what F stands for. Friends.
To do stuff together. Yeah. U is for you and me. Okay. So let's get into the outfield. Julio, Luke Raley, Randy Arozarena, Victor Robles. Just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is once again brought to you by Booking.com. Explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. Even an Orioles fan or a Guardians fan can have a good time in New York no matter what happens on the diamond this October. You can drown your playoff woes with a New York slice or celebrate advancing to the next round with a delicious chopped cheese, all while taking in the autumn vibes in Manhattan and capping it all off with a great stay in the city. Booking.com delivers exactly the right U.S. stay for you, and the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, booking.yeah. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. We are wrapping up our grades for the 2024 Mariners position players. We just finished off the infield. Now let's go into the outfield. We got to go through 5 different players here over the next 10 or so minutes. So let's quickly hand out a grade to Mitch Haniger.
C minus.
Yeah, because I mean, what were you really expecting from Mitch Haniger this year?
Stayed healthy.
Yeah.
Like, he hit pretty well at T-Mobile Park.
Yep.
Hit some big home runs.
Yep.
You know, had his big moments. Pretty much exactly what I thought. It would have been nice if he could have hit for a little more average, if he could have hit lefties at all, which is why it's not a C plus, or it's not a C or a C plus. It's a C minus. He was kind of a useful bench piece who had 3 walk-offs this year, set the record for most walk-offs in the Mariners career. Had how many home runs? 12, 15, somewhere in that range. 12. Yeah. Some big ones mixed in there too as well. So yeah, I mean, Mitch was pretty much who we thought he was going to be, and he also happened to stay healthy. And you know, I think the Mariners didn't do him any favors by using him as much as they did in the first 2 months of the year. But yeah, overall, it was just kind of it's a mediocre season, but based on expectations, I would say that he more or less met them. The inability to hit left-handed pitching really hurt them. But yeah, it's C minus for me.
Yeah, I'll go D plus on this. Again, like, what were you really expecting? But also he slashed 208, 286, 334. It's an 85 WRC plus. He was bad defensively. He was worth negative 0.6 F4. I mean, by Fangraph standards, he was worse than Mitch Garver. I don't know if I would go that far, but they were more or less the same player though, or the same hitter this year though.
More Mitches, more problems for the Mariners.
Yeah, unfortunately, that pun did not work out in our favor.
They never homered in the same game.
I thought they did.
So much wasted potential. Nope.
Did they not? Oh,
nope.
So Mitch,
not a lot to say.
Yeah, not a ton here, but yeah, I think D plus, honestly. All right, let's get into actually a really fun group of players. Pretty good group of players here. Let's start with the newest guy in that group, Randy Arozarena. What did you think about his 2 months as a Mariner?
Specifically with the Mariners?
Yeah.
B minus.
Okay.
Certainly had some moments, and obviously his presence helped the Mariners lineup go from one of the worst in baseball to one of the best, at least, you know, in a 5-week sample size, but whatever. Statistically speaking, accurate. But there were also a lot of games where he just was the worst player on the field. And obviously there was the difficulty adapting to his new surroundings. And we heard some things about that. We heard some things about, like, he might be so unhappy or such a problem that the Mariners might trade him this winter after only 2 months. And so it wasn't a smooth ride. He did strike out quite a bit, but he was still pretty productive as a Mariner on top of that. And he even made a couple nice defensive plays. That was a bit of a surprise for us. And so, you know, I think just based on his time with the Mariners, B minus, he was fun. He was, I mean, if he does what he did over the final 2 months, the next 2 years in Seattle, then his time will be remembered fondly overall. If it's, you know, and hopefully with the time he gets to acclimate himself and you know, getting to spend the winter and coming into camp with the team and you know, the being used to playing a team with blah 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 blah. Hopefully he comes in next year and is, I don't want to say focused, because it's not like he wasn't focused or anything like that, but you know, just comfortable. Yeah, he's just comfortable. And if he does that, then I think he'll be really good and he'll be a good fit and he'll fit right in. But you know, just based on these last 2 months, or first 2 months, I guess I should say, yeah, B minus.
He actually hit at T-Mobile Park. That's a great start. Yeah, with the Mariners, he slashed 231, 356, 377. Would like to see more in the slugging department there. Right. But it's a 122 WRC plus. He was worth basically a win, 0.9 F4. He was worth one win by Fangraph standards in 100 games with the Rays to start the year. Right. So he was basically as valuable in about half as many games in a Mariners uniform.
Right. That's due to the terrible month of April he had, but yeah. He was fun. Like, he was exactly what you needed him to be.
Yep.
Hopefully
he'd stay the same.
Yep.
K rate went up when he became a Mariner. Yeah, by about 4%. So yeah, I'll go B on Randy.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he was perfectly fine and helped in a lot of different ways. Victor Robles, A plus. A plus. Yeah. I mean,
you know what? A minus. Don't try and steal home.
Oh my God.
Stupidest thing I've ever seen until 24 hours later.
I mean, if part of the grading factor here is expectations, right? Heading into the player's season. I mean, we had 0 for Victor Robles when they took a shot on him.
I would venture to say that half of the Mariners fandom didn't know who Victor Robles was. At least half.
And the other half
thought he was maybe a failed prospect.
Yeah, they're just like, what's even the point? Why even sign the guy, right?
We saw that a lot of that.
Oh, if you look at my tweet where, I said that this was happening, like a lot of the replies are like, why even bother? Right. So
why?
Yeah, Robles was basically an all-star in his time with the Mariners this year. I think it was like 171 WRC plus as a Mariner. It's worth 3.5 wins as a Mariner. Like, dude was awesome. Stole a ton of bases. Played pretty good defense. Hit a ton. Had some really impressive home runs. Didn't hit many, but when he did, they were very impressive. Victor Robles is a really fun player. So yeah, A plus. So Luke Raley, your favorite Mariner?
B plus, A minus, somewhere in that range.
I go with an A minus.
Yeah.
He was a part-time player essentially. He had 455 plate appearances on the year. But again, like we talked about yesterday, he was a major question mark considering how his 2023 went. It's like one half he was amazing. He was one of the best hitters in baseball. And then the second half he was a slightly below average hitter. So it was like, all right, well, what are you going to get there? Is there like some middle ground? Is he just going to fall off a cliff? Is that second half essentially who he is, and he's just a below average hitter who can only hit against righties? Like, what is the story on Luke Raley? And look, he was pretty consistent for most of the year. I mean, he had a couple of lulls here and there, but I mean, who doesn't over the course of a 162
got off to a
season?
really slow start, which caused a lot of people to abandon ship early, and then
they didn't really play him to start the year,
right? I mean, because he was terrible in spring training. He was terrible in his first few weeks, and then they kind of benched him for like 10 days, essentially. And then, I mean, from August 1st to the end of the year, I think he had a 190 WRC plus. So look, like Raley's still kind of a streaky hitter, which isn't that surprising because he still swings and misses a lot, still strikes out a lot. Although those did go down pretty significantly in the second half, but he absolutely can be like a middle of the order threat for months at a time. And I think what we saw this year is after you got through that initial slow start in April, the down swings weren't quite as severe, and the upswings, they tended to last a little bit longer. And also, by the way, he absolutely crushes at T-Mobile Park. So Luke Raley, had some issues at first base when they moved him over there defensively. Hopefully he cleans those up because I'm pretty sure he's going to be the opening day first baseman next year. But from the power to the speed to the personality, the effort level always at 100. And again, the best bunter on the team, bar none. And because he's such a good bunter, that's why it's not an A. I'd prefer if he didn't bunt at all.
Sure. All right. So lastly, we're going to wrap things up here with Julio. It was a disaster of a start to the year for Julio. He wasn't just bad for Julio standards. He was just bad. Full stop. Right. And then started to get it going in July, but then gets hurt in that Astros series coming out of the All-Star break. And you're like, well, there you go. Right. As soon as he's starting to turn it around, his season might be over. And then he's able to come back a lot quicker than most expected. Didn't look like he should have been on the field. I mean, he was just grimacing a lot. They had to take him out of that game in Detroit. It's like, it seems like they're really pushing it, but he continued to fight through it and eventually really started to find his groove. And he had a great month of September.
The really good version of Julio started around July, like early July. It's like pre-All-Star break. He had a little bit of a breakout, and then he got hurt. But yeah, overall, we have to take into account the totality of the season. We have to take into account the player in which we're talking about. I think I would give Julio B minus, like somewhere in that range. Like for just about anybody else, this is like a B plus, A minus type of season.
Yeah.
For Julio,
this grade was going to be a lot worse had the first couple of months of Julio's season carried over for the rest of the year. But, you know, at the end of it, he ends up being a 2020 guy for the third consecutive year. Slashes 270
WRC plus.
Yeah, he slashes 273, 325, 409. The slugging needs to be a lot better, but still, it's a fine slash line.
Keep in mind, slugging's down across the league this year.
But I mean, that's far off from where he was the year prior.
He didn't get, and I don't think he got to and stayed above 100 until like middle of August, like right before the injury, I think is when he finally hit 100 and never dipped below it or whatever.
And he ends up, you know, after all of this, still being pretty much a 4-win player by Fangraph standards. The defense was great. Yeah, so it was still really good season just when you look at the overall numbers, but taking into account what the journey looked like, I'm feeling a B minus on this. So that's going to do it for our show. But before we let you guys out of here, we are going to spin this lovely wheel that's on your screen right now, or if you're listening, just imagine a very high quality, high production, very colorful wheel of
Pat Sajak would be proud.
Yeah, exactly. So this is for a new series that we're going to be doing on Locked On Mariners called Top 5 Tuesday, or for this week, it's going to be Top 5 Thursday. We already told you guys that depending on how the rest of the week goes, it might happen on Tuesday, it might happen on Thursday. So this week, it's going to happen on Thursday. So for Top 5 Thursday, we are going to spin this wheel, and whatever it lands on, we are going to do a top 5 on tomorrow's show for. Now, so we are going to spin the wheel once for a topic that Colby is going to have to do a top 5 for, and we're going to spin the wheel a second time for me to do a top 5. Now, in the future, we're going to have this where one of us is going to do a more serious top 5 and one of us is going to do a more silly top 5. But we only have a few options for this week. So just whatever we land on, we're going to do. So the first spin here is going to be for Colby.
High quality sound.
That's right. And it's going to be top 5 ballpark foods for Colby.
Okay.
I like that.
Hopefully this means Ty gets a serious one, because I don't think we can do 2 like silly ones on the same episode.
True. I mean,
that probably would not go over well with our bosses.
Watch us try though.
Might have
top
to.
5
nice.
trade targets.
Oh,
all right, so I'll be doing top 5 trade targets tomorrow, and you'll be doing top 5 ballpark foods. So we're gonna compile our top 5 lists, and by the way, we're gonna do this every day before we're gonna do the top 5. We're gonna spin the wheel the day before, so be sure to stick to the end of our episodes the day before we're going to be doing these. So, and we'll let you guys know if we're gonna be spinning the wheel on a particular episode. All right, so that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.